Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. For the best conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. So, Ralph, we got the Wednesday Night Wars in full gear, no pun intended. And Chris Jericho took some interesting shots at WWE Creative where he said, "We the people is dead. It was a dumb idea or a stupid idea from bad creative." Little shots fired there by Chris Jericho, who has been very adamant in saying that, we're not at war with WWE. So what do you think of the comments made on Dynamite?
Well, I think it was smart on his behalf to say something like that because, one, if you notice the reaction from the crowd, they were certainly into it. And if you notice the reaction from a good majority of the wrestling community, whether it's on social media, that's probably one of the most talked about things that came out of Dynamite last night. So Jericho doing what he does best, really drawing attention to himself and drawing attention to AEW. So it's hard to complain when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's gaining attention and gaining fans.
No, definitely. And, this whole promo, I know some people are saying that it was like the greatest promo since the pipe bomb, which I'm not going to say that, but I will say that the promo was very, very good. And it, showed what stars that we could see here with this heel faction now known as the Inner Circle, which consists of Jericho himself, Sammy Guevara, Santana Ortiz, and Jake Hager, as Chris Jericho would say, Jake Hagar, because I think he was confusing Sammy Hagar with Jake Hager. But still, nonetheless, I will say that Jake Hager looked very awesome just staring at the camera. It's exactly what they need to book him like. He is basically their Brock Lesnar. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, of course, Jake Hager, he's got a lot of credentials as far as actual amateur wrestling is concerned. We know what he did in the WWE. I think one of the biggest reasons Jericho said what he said as far as the "We the People" moniker or the saying is because he wants Jake Hager to be totally freed of anything he did within WWE.
Yep, exactly.
Jake Hager, Jack Swagger, whatever you want to call him, is one of those guys that falls into the category of one of the guys that was probably, in the eyes of the fans, underutilized and not really meeting his full potential. He was also very young when he went to the WWE. So where he's at right now in his career, even though he's been away from wrestling, he's probably a totally different person. He's gotten a chance to step back away from professional wrestling and really reflect on what he did, who he wants to be as a character, and really make this whole Jake Hager thing work within AEW. So I think that's one of the reasons why Jericho said what he said, and we know the reaction it got.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to compare him to Brock Lesnar to a certain extent, I mean, Lesnar, of course, his credentials speak for itself. I think Brock certainly accomplished much more outside of the WWE, and he's a huge draw. I don't know if Jake Hager is necessarily at that point, but you want to say maybe like a poor man's Brock Lesnar? Sure.
Yeah, I totally agree, Ralph. And just to go on to that, I think one thing that you could say about Jake Hager is just keep him standing there, staring at the camera, make him look more intimidating, because I think when you keep him like that, he looks more intimidating than, if he starts talking and something might come out wrong, because he wasn't a great promo in WWE. So having Jericho as his mouthpiece can be what Paul Heyman is to Brock Lesnar. So, yeah. Let's go into the shows themselves. And one thing that I think people are really looking into is the ratings. They went down, both shows, NXT and AEW. AEW went from 1.4 million to 1.14 million, whereas NXT went down from 890,000 to 790,000. Should we be concerned, Ralph, that the ratings are down this week?
No, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be concerned. I think one of the things you're probably going to touch on is there was a lot of stiff competition as far as professional sports are concerned with the MLB playoffs. I'll let you speak to that.
Yep.
I would be more concerned if I was NXT, because if you think back to what they've been on USA for about a month now, because they've had the 2-week head start as far as being live. I know that was just for an hour, but they started at over 1 million views, and I think as the weeks have gone on, the numbers have decreased. As the weeks have progressed.
Yes, that's
so
definitely true. That is definitely
they
true.
when their first episode, they were over 1 million viewers, and then I think the most recent one was like 799,000 or whatever the case may be. So I might be a little more concerned if I was WWE or NXT, especially next week if those numbers start to dip a little more. If I'm AEW, I don't look at that and necessarily be as concerned because again, this is only your second show. You're continuing to produce good content, and the word's getting out there that the content has been really good and that the show is exciting. And again, this is your second show. You can't really expect to have the same numbers that you would have or have the same amount of intrigue as you would with your very first show that you've ever had. This is the first time that WWE has had competition in 20 plus years. So, of course, people are going to tune in just to see what it's all about. Had the numbers been a million views, I think they should be concerned, but I wouldn't really overanalyze the numbers too much.
No, I agree. Talking from someone that works in television and understands how these ratings work,
Right.
First and foremost, you had 2 decisive game 5s for the MLB playoffs last night, and one of them that really affected how AEW and NXT would do in the ratings is the fact that the Los Angeles Dodgers were facing the Washington Nationals in what ended up being an extra inning game, so it went well past 10 o'clock. The game started around 8:30. It pulled the highest ratings of the night at like 5.5 million. So you would think, the 500,000 that were taken out of both AEW and NXT's audience were probably watching that game. So I think that, we'll see how it looks in October and the rest of the playoff picture looks. But I am not too concerned yet. I'm with you in saying that if it drops under 1 million for AEW, let's say if it's starting to get to like how NXT is around that 790,000 after starting with 1.4, then we could be a little concerned. But I think if you hover around that 850,000 to a little over 1 million weekly, you're going to be fine because just because the ratings dip doesn't necessarily mean that the show is bad. Like look at Raw, for example. Raw had a better rating this week than it did 2 weeks ago. And people can argue that was the worst Raw of the year. I
wouldn't be surprised if SmackDown's numbers weren't as good as they were last week. I mean, when you talk about the very first thing or the very first episode, the season premiere, whatever you want to call it, usually ratings tend to be higher. And as the show progresses, sometimes they fluctuate a little bit, especially nowadays where you talk about this all the time and you make this point where content is consumed in different ways nowadays. So for those people that may have been watching the baseball games, they're probably going to go to YouTube and check the highlights or the clips and then go back to DVR and stuff like that. So that's not necessarily going to reflect directly in the ratings. So
exactly.
I really wouldn't overanalyze that stuff.
No, definitely not. And being someone myself that actually has to DVR both All Elite Wrestling and NXT because of, obligations that I have on Wednesday nights, my DVR recording does not take an effect how the ratings work. So that's definitely something to look into. But let's actually get into the actual shows of AEW and NXT. We'll start quickly with AEW Dynamite. We start off with a very impressive upset special in the tag team tournament where Private Party defeated the Young Bucks in the first round of the tag team championships. I thought this was a very good match, and I'll even go out and say that this was the Young Bucks' best match in AEW. Would you agree?
You're putting me on the spot. I don't know if it was their best match. I think the ladder match was definitely very good. More of a spot fest. It was a good match. Again, kind of a little bit of a spot fest where it was definitely very fast paced. Again, this is all subjective. It's based on what you're interested in and what you like out of professional wrestling or what you're into. I'm sure if you ask somebody who is more into like the psychological type match, slow paced with its more high spots or mat wrestling, stuff like that. So, for me, it was a little fast paced and a little, all over the place and a little bit of a spot fest, but it was still good. It was still entertaining. At the end of the day, the crowd was into it. I don't know if it was my favorite Bucks match of all time, but it was good, especially for a TV match. It was very good.
Yeah, I'll agree. But one thing that I will say about the Young Bucks, and they get a lot of crap for being spot monkeys and really, they don't do storytelling or whatever, the arguments that you usually get with the Young Bucks.
Right.
I will say, though, they really worked the gimmick of the match, the gimmick of the tag team match, which is just simply avoid the other team to tag. And they were doing that all throughout the match, whether it was avoiding Mark Quinn from getting tagged in or Isaiah Kennedy from getting tagged in. And it helped with their hot tags when they both got tagged in late in the match. And I really like the ending of this match, too. So, big win for Private Party. Was not expecting that at all. Hopefully this ends up leading to the Jurassic Express versus Private Party, where Jurassic Express beats them, heads to the finals, and wins the tag team championship. So let's move on. We already talked about the Jericho promo. So after that, we had Darby Allin versus Jimmy Havoc. Winner becomes the number one contender for the AEW championship, which Darby Allin wins. What do you think about Darby Allin beating Havoc and facing Jericho?
Yeah. I think this was kind of the expected outcome. I thought Darby Allin was going to go over here. And, it's the most obvious thing that they could do because obviously Darby Allin took Cody Rhodes to his limit and they had the draw. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him go the distance with Jericho and have it be a draw as well next week.
That's going to be tough to do that. I mean, I get what you're trying to say, have Darby Allin be that guy that takes both of them to the limit. But I think the story that they're telling here is that Jericho will beat Darby Allin and he finishes off the person that Cody couldn't finish. So that's,
and that's all good. That's all possible too. But I thought that Darby Allin was going to be the guy to win this match.
Yep,
so.
I agree. So after that, we have Britt Baker and Riho defeating Emi Sakura and B. Priestley. It looked like we are getting further into the story between Britt Baker and B. Priestley, but it was actually announced Thursday that we will get a women's championship match next week in Philadelphia between Riho and Britt Baker. So does Britt Baker take the title off of Riho and then B. Priestley becomes the number one contender for the women's championship?
I think it's more likely that B. Priestley cost Britt Baker the match. I don't think they're going to take the belt off Riho that quickly.
True. That would be kind of quick for, a belt that just started. But I thought this match was decent, but, for any other TV match. But I think the match after that was a little bit better. Jon Moxley against Shawn Spears. Moxley defeats Shawn Spears. And then we have Pac on commentary. And throughout the match, he's saying how he should be the number one contender. Why is Darby Allin and Jimmy Havoc having this match? Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So,
I couldn't help but think to myself as this match progressed that, Shawn Spears or Ty Dillinger left NXT and WWE because he wasn't given opportunities there and he was more or less just another guy. And I kind of look at him now in AEW and I'm just like, I don't know what they're going to do with him because it seems like the guys that they're ready to put over are kind of put in a position to feel like they're special or elevated within the roster. Those guys are already at that level. And Shawn Spears, to me, seems like a guy that's going to end up being one of those guys that's just kind of pigeonholed again and put in, that category where he's just another guy on the roster, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing anything with it. I just don't. He's doing all the right things to come across as a heel, but there's just something missing there. Like there's something that's not getting him to that point where
a win.
He's a true a win certainly, but just I don't know. He's doing the right things, but he's not at that level yet.
No, I can see what you're getting at here, and I think you have Moxley getting to where he is, Kenny Omega's sort of getting to where he is, Pac is obviously where he is, and speaking of Pac, after the match, we have this little altercation, Ralph, where Omega comes out with a barbed wire wrapped bat and broomstick. He tosses the bat to Moxley, but then Pac attacks Kenny Omega afterwards and then walks out. And then Moxley is confused. So do you like the call of putting Pac in this situation? Because it seems a little confusing to throw Pac in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine because it keeps him involved in the storylines and keeps storylines progressing. And, you know, Pac, he certainly has his issues, I think, more so with the Elite as a whole. Him and Kenny Omega had their match, so I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. No.
It keeps him on the show, which means that people are more exposed to him and exposed to the character, and adds a little extra ripple into the story that they're trying to tell. So it was fine.
No, okay. In that regard, fine. Keep him on TV. That's always a plus. But we head to our main event of the night, which is Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara beating Hangman Page and Dustin Rhodes in a pretty entertaining match. But I think what happened afterwards was the more entertaining part. So Jericho beats Dustin Rhodes. We have Hager clotheslining Hangman Page out of the ring. They go backstage. Lights go out. Cody Rhodes enters. Then you have Santana and Ortiz come in. MJF comes in, teases that he's going to hit Cody Rhodes with a chair. Then he attacks everybody else. The Inner Circle gain control. The Young Bucks attack Santana and Ortiz. Jericho's on the outside where Darby Allin skateboards in. And the Elite with Darby Allin stand tall in the ring where the Inner Circle retreat. I thought this was a pretty entertaining beatdown and scuffle at the end of the night. So good way to close out the show. And they promote Darby Allin versus Chris Jericho for next week. So thoughts on the final beatdown quick?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty well done. I especially like the part where Darby Allin came down on the skateboard because, again, that's not something you're going to see every day. So seeing something like that, something that's fresh, something that's different, I thought it was good. Crowd was awesome throughout the entire show. They were really hot for the segment, so thought it was good. It served its purpose. MJF had a really good segment again where it looked like he might turn on Cody, and he didn't. So they're still kind of toying around with that.
Right. All right, let's move on to NXT really quick. There really wasn't much to go over with this show. There was a few notables here, but first things first, we had a title change. Lio Rush defeating Drew Gulak for the now NXT Cruiserweight Championship in a pretty decent match. We had a couple of squash matches here, including Rhea Ripley defeating Alliyah in like seconds with a very awesome submission move. What do you think of that submission move by Rhea Ripley?
Love the submission move. Love the fact that she called out Shayna Baszler because that's the match I think that a lot of people want to see, and it makes a lot of sense.
Right. We have a tag team match originally for Breezango versus Everrise, but then the Forgotten Sons actually come out and put themselves into the match. Forgotten Sons beat Breezango. You would think Breezango would be built as a better tag team, but I guess they want to put the Forgotten Sons into the tag team title picture here. And with a win over Breezango, that simply does that. So, moving on, Cameron Grimes beats Boa in seconds, but then Killian Dane comes out. He attacks Boa and then says this is just the beginning. So, are we hinting at a Grimes Killian Dane match in the future?
Certainly seems like it.
Yeah. Roderick Strong beating Isaiah Swerve Scott in a very good match here. But after the match, it was Adam Cole coming out, cuts a promo saying that Finn Balor came back, Ciampa returned because they dream of taking down the Undisputed Era, never going to happen. Then we get the Velveteen Dream cutting a promo and showing Roderick Strong with the North American Championship. Then, superimposes it out of the picture and covers what would be Roderick Strong's good stuff, I guess you want to say. And it's a very small censor blob, so making it seem like he's small down there. Ciampa comes out, says Goldie, Daddy's home after coming out with the crutch and grabbing a chair from the crowd. We have Bianca Belair defeating Dakota Kai, and then Walter defeating Kushida in a pretty good main event. So last thoughts here for NXT after rumbling all this together last minute.
As far as NXT is concerned, it's unfortunate that right now they're going head to head against AEW. I wish this happened sooner when their roster had more established guys like Andrade. I guess you can add him in there. Aleister Black, Ricochet. I think right now they're at a point where they have a lot of young talent, and there's guys that are really good like Damian Priest and Kushida, Walter, that are all guys that are well known to the NXT diehard fans and even fans outside of, WWE, just your hardcore wrestling fans. But for whatever reason, it seems like AEW has been really successful at making all of their people or all of the people on the roster feel special, at least to the certain point where you care about the match. And I can't say the same for WWE, and I can't really say the same for NXT when I watch it. They're trying to push a lot of guys that aren't necessarily over or established yet, and it certainly shows because they don't get the type of reaction that you get when you're watching the AEW shows. Now, granted, the size of the crowd is much bigger for the AEW shows, and NXT needs to get out of Full Sail quick if they want
That
to
is
be taken
definitely
seriously,
true.
in my
Yeah.
opinion. But right now, it just seems like WWE and NXT isn't really trying to go head to head against AEW, at least not yet. Of course, they can call guys down, like we saw Finn Balor on the first, a couple weeks ago. He wasn't there this week. A little surprising. So it's kind of like, are you going to compete against him or are you not? So just kind of waiting for them to flip the switch and start putting some of their main guys back out there. And Johnny Gargano, he wasn't there. And
Why isn't
I don't
Johnny
know.
Gargano on? Like, it's been 4 weeks.
I
It's
don't
been
know.
4 weeks and he hasn't been there in 3 of those weeks. It's very odd. Very odd.
Yeah, no, it's odd because when you look at some of the matches, a lot of the people that were involved in the matches were people that even for somebody like me who watches a ton of NXT, most of the people you've hardly heard of. So it's like they're not even B-level guys to compete against a show in AEW where, I guess if you look at the Darby Allin Jimmy Havoc match, even a guy like Darby Allin or Jimmy Havoc, they're put in a position where the match or the guys involved in it feel special. It's like the fans should care
I
about
agree.
this. I can't do the same about NXT, at least right now, because they've always been really good about booking and storytelling and stuff like that. And it's just a little surprising and kind of what they've done so far, at least as far as this week's
I totally
episode.
agree. So that is it for our review of the Wednesday Night Wars, NXT, and Dynamite for October 9th. Vote on the poll above my head which one you thought was better between Dynamite and NXT. Don't forget to like this video, share it all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for the best conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti, and thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.